Robert, what did we just see? What a win!
This has been a crazy game.
We are less than 24 hours away from the most hotly anticipated chess final of 2023. It's a repeat of last year's Speed Chess Championship final between Magnus Carlsen and Hikaru Nakamura. Now, this game was played in the final last year. It's a bullet chess game, so 1 minute on the clock plus 1 second to move increment, and this gives you a flavour of how insane this matchup's going to be. What a game this is, let's check this one out. So Hikaru kicks off with e4 and Sicilian from Magnus. He's chasing the match, he's 2 or 3 points down at this point, he's trying to make a comeback. So we get knight f3, e6, Hikaru takes the centre, pawn captures, knight captures, and a6. This is called the Kan variation, K-A-N, not C-A-N. Now we get bishop d3 and bishop c5. Hits the unprotected knight. It drops back, hits the unprotected bishop, so the bishop retreats. Magnus losing time, but so is Hikaru with that knight. Now we see bishop e3, d6 played, and f4. Hikaru launching this kingside pawn storm as we're going to see. Knight d7 from Magnus. This knight develops. Now we get knight g to f6, queen e2, and we can see where Hikaru's king's going. We're in for an exciting game. b5. Magnus going for his play on the queen side, and g4. Neither player backing down an inch. You know, Magnus doesn't go h6 here, which is one of the top computer moves. He's laser focused on his own initiative. It's what makes them both so exceptional at bullet and blitz. He allows g5, but he's cleared a square on d7 for this knight to retreat. Hikaru castles, bishop b7, king b1, and now the knight smashes through on d3. Both of these knights fighting for the same square. So Hikaru recaptures with the pawn, bolsters his centre, trying to eliminate some of the influence of this bishop. And now Magnus castles into this pawn storm, and this is where things ramp up a notch. After h4, a5, both players storming the enemy king. a4, Magnus is the first one to force his opponent to react. So the knight saves itself. The b pawn is hit, but Magnus ignores. a3, looking to rip open lines. So Hikaru goes b3, looking to keep them closed. And queen a5, immediately launching the lady into the danger zone, looking for stuff like this. And Hikaru, he plays the thematic break on the king side with g6. You don't want to go h6 first and allow black to go g6 and lock things up. Keep the lines closed. And again, Magnus not reacting to this pawn. He goes bishop f6, bringing that sniper onto the most deadly diagonal on the board. And now if you take here, well, fine, looks good, but actually the king can either sidestep, use the enemy pawn as a shield, or you can even take it. You know, you're still not actually getting destroyed, because after this you can do this and you are surviving. Not enough white firepower in the attack yet. So Hikaru just leaves the pawn there. Sometimes the threat is worse than the execution, especially in bullet chess. So he brings this knight into the game. Great move. Here Magnus takes the open file. Hikaru challenges. We see a pair of rooks coming off the board, and now Magnus plays a very natural move, activating this knight, but he does leave the defense of this e5 square when he brings the knight here. So what should he have done? Well, according to the engine, b4 is best to open this queen to laterally defend the 5th rank and pressure this pawn. But not an easy move to spot. You shut the queen in this direction. So knight c5 was played, and Hikaru, very astute, takes advantage of the weakness of the last move and pushes on with e5 here. We get pawn captures. This pawn recaptures and it kicks back the bishop to a more passive diagonal. Hikaru in the driving seat, and this next move is fantastic. He still doesn't do anything about the tension here. He plays bishop to g5. Horrible move to face in bullet, because he's overloading this bishop on e7. You know, if you take very natural response, well then after knight recaptures, you've got two problems. this knight is hanging because the bishop no longer defends it, and this knight now threatens to do all sorts of nasty stuff over there. You can't deal with both threats. So what do? You can't retreat your knight somewhere, or your bishop simply drops. Magnus finds an exceptional defensive move. He plays queen to d8, the top move, because now if the bishop captures, the queen takes back and you keep the defense of the knight going, and black's still in the game here, but white in the driving seat. So what does Hikaru do? Well, he plays queen to e3. Not necessarily best. You know, the computer did want to actually take, and now finally take through on h7 here with check, because now Magnus says, you know what, you've left it so long to not capture, I'm going to take your pawn, and look at how he's just activated his rook. Both players just masters of activating the pieces to the maximum. So the knight is pressured. What to do? Well, Hikaru comes up with this shocking but brilliant sacrifice here. He plays rook takes on c5. Again, not the computer's favourite. You see the eval bar react. The computer wanted to take here and then take with the pawn and that kind of thing. But there's only one path that black can tread here to be slightly better. So for example, if you take that rook, which you'd love to do, well, now you lose your queen. This is the problem. And although there is still some play down against this knight and everything like that, white is better. So taking the rook, no good. What about if you take the bishop here? Well, white simply recaptures, and when you do the material count, white is a minor piece up. So none of that stuff is working, but there is a good move for black, which Hikaru overlooked, but so did Magnus in the time pressure. Do pause if you want to try and look for the tactic. But the way for black to go here is with bishop takes on f3. And now things are slightly different, because if you recapture with the knight here, well, now you can take the rook, allow your queen to drop, because then you take this queen since the knight moved, and black's actually better here and exchange up. Now there's a couple of other sort of similar variations, right? But that's the idea here, that black can get an advantage with takes here. But not easy to spot at all. So Magnus plays a different move. He plays pawn takes on h5. The computer doesn't like it, as you can see, but look at the counterplay he generates. So here Hikaru plays rook takes on b5. He saves that one from the attack and hits this bishop on b7. So Magnus now takes on g5, the queen recaptures, and he saves this bishop. Now it looks like you can take here and win a piece, but actually Hikaru can chuck in this Zwischenzug, force the queens off, then recapture, and white's winning a piece up. So Magnus puts the bishop on d5, a real monster on that central square, covering the pawn, and it sets a nasty trap. Because if Hikaru takes this pawn, looks really natural, adds some defense here, well, now the bishop can take, and things are slightly different. If the queen recaptures, it drops to the rook. So knight recaptures, most logical of course, but then there's queen d3 check. And this isn't just a check winning material, this actually leads to mate. If you step this way, you deliver the mate like this, and if you step this way to the corner, queen d1 is mate, using this attacking thorn in the side. So you cannot take this pawn here. Hikaru didn't do that. He chops off the queens, rook recaptures, and then goes knight g5, targeting this pawn and forcing Magnus onto the defensive back foot. Rook c5, preparing to activate the rook. You know, you couldn't bring it to b7, but now you can bring it to the 7th, or the 2nd after Magnus pushes here and starts running those pawns. I mean, how is Hikaru ever not just going to put this one away instantly? He's a piece up. Well, this thing gets wild. Rook c2 and h6. The knight drops back here, and now Carlsen's play is just masterful. So the computer's top move here is to take, and it does look nice to shatter those pawns, but how are you actually then going to survive this when white's got an entire piece up? Well, the computer says rook d8, hit the knight, it should drop back apparently, not take that pawn, I didn't explore that, and then you should go g5, computer says maybe you can hold, but realistically white should win this one in a bullet game. So Magnus goes rook f8, he leaves these pieces on the board, he wants to keep this one on the dangerous diagonal, and after rook h2, he just plays this awesome activation of the rook. You know, he doesn't go g5, most natural move on the board, because then you're running into knight f6 check, picking up this bishop on d5. It's also why Magnus didn't go g5 a move sooner when he played rook f8. So he goes rook f4, covering the pawn, pressuring here, and Hikaru goes king c2. Great move, saying please take that knight, Magnus, simplify things for me. No such luck, king f7 played. And now you'll see the eval bar saying white is loads better. There's these knight maneuvers you can start doing into d6 and this and that and blah blah blah. Sure, the computers, you know, would just kill this position, but human chess, Hikaru just brings his king in, g5, king e3, and after king g6, yes, there is a concrete way for Hikaru to get a big advantage here, but it is not straightforward. So what he could have done was retreat the knight to c3, not always easy to see, or come into f6, but basically you hit this bishop, and if it moves away, which you'd like to do, then the pawn drops and the rook is hit, and the knights start dancing and it's good for white. But okay, Hikaru missed to attack this bishop. He started pushing his b-pawn, very natural, but now rook f1 from Magnus. He not only comes behind this pawn after check and here, but now he's also going to be targeting this. And because of the sneaky check, he forced Hikaru's king to the second. Now there could be skewer stuff in the air. Okay, yes, there's knight c2, but you don't want to get into any of that nonsense. So king e3 and rook b2. You do not want to be taking, giving this pass up. Then the bishop takes, supporting. So rook f2 played to save the rook, supported by king and knight. And now Magnus, he could take this pawn. It's a good move, but he plays pawn h3, sorry, running that one down the board, and this thing's just getting crazy. Knight f3 played, covering that square where the pawn's trying to advance to, but now you run into g4. Look at this avalanche of pawns. Knight h2, and here Magnus had a winning shot. He could have played bishop takes on e4, eliminate that knight, which defends the g3 square, and then push on with the pawn, forking these two. He misses it, goes h5, but still a great move, keeps his advantage. Rook f6 check played, the king drops back, and Hikaru, so good at bullet, he now goes for counterplay. He sees the pawns are running through, brings this one back. Classy stuff now from Magnus. He still doesn't promote. He wants more, so he first goes for kicking the knight. We get knight h5 check. Hikaru going for the king. King h7. And now after this pawn drops, it was about to promote. The rook recaptures. Here comes the white king trying to set up a mating net against Carlsen's. g3 played. The pawn's running through, but Naka going for counterplay, but he doesn't quite have it. He gives the checks, brings the king to the danger zone, but after rook h1, threatening to mate the queen, he's got nothing better but to check and drive this king away with knight and rook, but he doesn't have a killer blow. So the knight takes with check, but the bishop simply recaptures. King takes, the queen goes through. Carlsen technically winning, but they're down to seconds, and Hikaru's got passed pawns. He drives this king away. Now rook f6 and queen g2. Classy waiting move from Carlsen, preparing now to centralise his queen. But first he's checked from this rook. The king takes, the pawn pushes, but queen d5. Pins that pawn, the king unpins, and now we get check, king back, and rook e1. The pawn's going to be dropping. Hikaru just abandons it. It drops off the board. There goes the rook. Carlsen completely winning. The queen runs through. It gets made, and here Hikaru lets his clock run down to 0. Magnus takes it, and this was the reaction of the commentary team when this one was done and dusted. I mean, what a game.
Robert, what did we just see? What a win!
This has been a crazy game. And Magnus Carlsen, he is showing his world championship medal, his pedigree, his ability to stay alert, to stay in this match. And he's going to checkmate Hikaru in the next few moves.
So that is a taster of what you can expect tomorrow. I hope you enjoyed this one. Do hit subscribe to never miss a future video, including the final, and see another epic game of chess. Check out the video on screen, and thanks very much for watching. See you soon.